Luzmila somehow got to the kitchen, took some drops for her heartache and poured them into a glass. Her heart ached frequently. In addition, her joints ached. She had a constant headache and a bothersome weakness that sometimes even made it difficult for the older woman to walk to the store. Because of her slowness, she often heard the discontent and grumbling of young people who were always in a hurry to get somewhere. Few people helped her. It was easier to insult her and call Luzmila an old turtle. No one could help her now because she lived alone. Luzmila had worked for many years as an educator in an orphanage, and before that, she had been a physics and mathematics teacher in a village school. But that school was closed, and Luzmila had to move to the city, where she chose a slightly different profession. She wanted to continue working with children, but with children who needed love, attention, and care. And so she became an educator at the orphanage. However, she was unable to have children. She was diagnosed with infertility at an early age, and Luzmila was afraid that no one would marry her like that, because every man dreams of continuing his lineage, but she worried in vain. At 25, our heroine married Bacia, who loved her and accepted her as she was. It was he who suggested a good idea to his beloved wife. "Luz, why don't we take the child from an orphanage?" "Ha! Since God didn't give us children, we can give a good life to one who has been abandoned," said Bacia. "Are you sure you are ready for that?" "Vasya, understand, a child is not a toy. What if you don't awaken a father's love? Why do you take me? There are no other people's children. If we adopt a child, it is ours, and that's it." Luzmila cried out of pure emotion because she really wanted to adopt a child. He was weak, fragile, and had problems with one leg. After years of working at the orphanage, she realized that no one would adopt such a child, because they usually keep the healthy ones. She did not want Sasha to continue growing up in an orphanage, because many people laughed at him for his leg, called him defective, and even beat him a lot. Luda told her husband what kind of child she wanted to adopt. Vasya thought about it and decided that the boy had to be helped. "It's okay. He'll be fine with us. Maybe we can cure him," Vasya said with a smile and hugged his wife. "It's a pity we didn't decide sooner. Maybe we would have had several children," Luda said, to make up for it because she and her husband were already over 40. "That's fate," Vasya replied. "We weren't ready for it and now we're mature." "Maybe you're right. Vasya, I love you very much and I love you too, Luzmila. We will have a strong and friendly family." Sasha was adopted and he quickly adapted to the family. The boy became attached to his adoptive parents. He loved them madly. A few years later, disaster struck. In the evening, Baz went into the kitchen to drink water, and his heart failed him. When Luzmila heard the noise, she was frightened. Baz was gone, so she cautiously left the bedroom and saw her beloved lying on the floor. The woman immediately called an ambulance, but the doctors arrived too late. Bacia died of a heart attack. Luzmila and Sasha had been mourning Basia's death for a long time. At first, the woman went to her husband's grave every day. She talked to him, sharing the successes of her son Sasha. "It's hard without you, Bacia. We miss you. Sasha sends his regards. He is getting more handsome every day." "What a pity you can't see him," Luzmila said through tears, sitting at her husband's grave. Many years have passed since then. Luzmila retired and money started to run out. Sasha lived with her to help his mother. And when he got fired from his job, he decided to go north to work for a year. "Oh, Sasha, I have a bad feeling," Luzmila said, looking at her son. "Maybe. You don't want to go there. I've had a nightmare. Mom, don't make this up. I'll be fine. Men travel there all the time. They make good money and everything goes well for them. I'll be back before you know it. How fast time goes by. Take the cross and the idol will make me feel better." "Okay, Mom, don't worry too much. You can't." Sasha hugged her mother and kissed her wrinkled forehead. I'll try, honey." That day, she sat on the bench for a long time, staring at the empty bus stop of the house where Sasha had left. Knowing that Sasha still had work to do, she kept looking out the window towards that same stop, hoping that her son would soon get off the bus and she would feed him a delicious lunch. But her premonition did not deceive her. On the appointed day, Sasha did not return. Luzmila was told that he had disappeared and that they couldn't find him. How many tears did the woman shed? How many times did she go to all the authorities to find her son? But all they gave her was a list. First, she lost her husband, and now her only son. The woman was inconsolable, and her health suffered because of it. She felt lonely, needy, and sick. Every day she went to the bus stop, begging and cursing at the same time. And again the woman returned home alone. Soon the locals began to pay attention to her, condescendingly considering her a lunatic. "Hello, Grandma. I saw Luzmila at the bus stop a week ago. Can I give you money?" "For the bus ticket." "No, I'm waiting for my son." Sasha smiled, the old woman, looking into the distance, looking for the bus. "How long have you been waiting?" "You need help." "All I need is to see my son," the woman said, as if not listening. He just shook his head sadly and stepped aside. One evening, as he was walking home, he noticed a stray dog in the bushes. The animal, with large, sad eyes, had its ears drooping, but it still wagged its frayed tail, making it clear that it was friendly. Shocked, his heart tightened, and he gently stroked the dog. "You feel lonely too, poor thing. It's okay, friend. You'll live with me now. I have a modest house, and my pension is not much, but it is enough for you and me." The dog barked happily in response, as if he understood her. Luzmila named him Tuzik and took him with her. So they began to live together. She went to the store with Tuzik every day, and when she couldn't, she sat in the yard while Tuzik did his natural chores. He was not a guide dog, but he made the old woman feel a little more confident and secure. After all, a faithful dog would never let its owner get hurt. Once he protected Luzmila from some teenagers who wanted to take her bag. "You are my guardian angel, Tuzik. With you, I will definitely not retire," Luzmila said with a smile and stroked him. "Sometimes, I think that you just appeared in my life. You could be my husband or my son. No, I don't want to believe that my Sasha is gone." She cried and hugged her pet. The weather was not good at all in the following days. Everything melted in mid-December, and then it rained, and the temperature immediately dropped below freezing, turning the city into a giant ice rink. The administration decided, as always, to save money and not spend much on sand or salt, so the people of the city walked around worried. But many of them couldn't keep their feet and fell, and the trauma centers were filling up with new patients. Luda looked out the window and sighed heavily. She had an appointment with the cardiologist, and outside, it was very slippery. She didn't have money for a taxi, and the buses don't go that far. So she decided to walk carefully to the clinic on her own. "Tuzik, will you come with me?" she asked, wrapping her head in a warm scarf. At the mirror, the dog peeped sadly and walked out of the hallway toward her room. "I wouldn't go out in this nasty weather either, but I have an appointment, and if I don't go out today, the next one won't be for another month, and I'll be dead in a month. I'm in pain all over. You know that yourself," Luzmila continued, although the pet was already lying on the sofa in the living room. The village was only partially sanded, and the road was more or less safe, but the last 300 meters seemed impassable to Luzmila. The ice was shining in the winter sun, young people were sliding smoothly across it, but Luzmila was afraid to take another step. An acquaintance of hers had been injured last year, slipped on the ice and was left disabled. Fortunately, she has children and grandchildren and people who always help, but Luzmila had no one, so she had to do everything herself. God, How am I going to get through it? The woman covered her mouth with her hand and was on the verge of crying. Why had a normal trip to the clinic turned into a dangerous ordeal? Why couldn't anyone sprinkle sand in this area so that people wouldn't be afraid to walk? Luzmila waved her hand and decided not to go to the hospital. Fear of ice. For her own health, she thought she would have no one to live for anyway. Her husband had died 7 minutes later, and her son never returned from his shift, but help came from a place that wasn't there at all. A wretched-looking woman approached her, dirty, with dark, matted hair that looked more like a nest, and clothes that looked like a pensioner with a paltry pension. She was a woman in her 40s or 50s who could afford better things. Because of the dirt on her face, Luda could not determine the age of the stranger. In addition, part of her face was covered by a large black hood. "Grandma, do you need help?" she asked. Luzmila felt a little uncomfortable. It must have been a homeless person standing in front of her and offering to help her. She needed it, more than Luzmila. "No, it's okay, daughter, it's okay." "Go with God," Luzmila said softly. "Well, I see. You have to go to the clinic." "Let me take you. No problem." "Thank you, daughter. Thank you. May God bless your health." Luzmila was about to bow to her. Our heroine noticed that some serious and well-dressed people were passing by, but no one thought of helping her. But the beggar woman, who probably didn't even have a house of her own, didn't pass by, but showed pity and sympathy for a completely unknown old woman. There aren't many people like that left. "In the meantime, put on your shoe covers and I'll get in line for the reception desk," said the homeless woman, and she got in line, although at that hour there was hardly anyone there. The old woman. She slowly put on her shoe covers because her hands were shaking from the cold. She had accidentally lost her last pair of mittens a few days ago and had no money to buy new ones. Luzmila stood beside the stranger. At that moment, a young nurse passed by, looked at the old woman and the disheveled homeless woman, and looked apprehensive. The girl in the white coat sat down and began accepting patients at the reception window. "Give me your card," she said curtly. One moment, Luzmila rummaged through her old bag, but the card wasn't there. "I don't think I brought it from home. Please check." The nurse rolled her eyes and went to get the card. When she came back, she said she wasn't in the hospital. "Wait, I'll look in my bag again. I can't believe I forgot it." Luda felt embarrassed. "You can't go any faster." "Woman, what do I do?" "You have to wait until the end of the shift." "I'm sorry, I won't be long." The tension was rising too much, and her vision was blurring. This happened when Luzmila became very nervous. Her hands began to shake even more, and the room suddenly became too hot. "So we're going to have you at home playing all kinds of forget-me-not games. Here, you're really just holding up the line." "So get moving," the nurse said, and Luzmila frantically circled around her. Behind her was a visitor, a young man with headphones on, who didn't care what was going on around him. He just bobbed his head to the music and hummed a tune softly. "How much longer will you be there? If you have no memory, stay home. I'm sick of you all out there. I've been in hospitals." "And I haven't had the sense to get ready at night," the girl said irritably. This conversation was overheard by the beggar woman who was about to leave, but was stopped by the nurse's rudeness. "How can you treat the elderly like that?" "Because you are rude to an elderly person," the beggar woman interceded. "Don't you realize that your behavior can cause a heart attack in some patient? I forgot to ask you. And no one has died here yet?" The nurse smiled wickedly. "I'll ask you not to raise your voice to me. So why are you yelling at me? She's your client, and you're supposed to treat her normally, not yell at her. That's your job, which you get paid for, by the way. Don't be like that. Don't fight with her." "After all," Ludmila said quietly, already in a bad mood because of the nurse's rudeness. She was close to tears from the helplessness she had felt. "You see, this is what has driven a man. You always treat old people like this. I would look at you if you had a man in front of you." You wouldn't yell at him like that. Please don't do it anymore, Luda whispered and grabbed the homeless man's sleeve for some reason. It's okay. I'll take care of everything. You go to the doctor's office. It's on 2 floors. You have to have an appointment, the homeless woman said. But her voice sounded somehow, in a particularly authoritarian way, that Luzmila didn't resist and went to the office. She left without knowing what happened next on the 1st floor, near the reception. The beggar girl was not going to leave this situation alone because it was impossible for her. She was outraged by the nurse's insolent treatment. "I'm going to have you thrown out of here like a broom," said the beggar girl in an icy voice. "Look, get out of here nicely. You're the only one in the way here, okay?" "Next," replied the nurse, who was beginning to be quite fed up with this vagabond. "How do you have the nerve to treat me like that? What are you? A queen for me to talk to you normally. I curtsy to you. Get out, I said. Or I'll call the guard. Come on." "I'm not afraid," smiled the beggar girl. "Whatever you say, but I wouldn't be confident," said the girl, and went after the guard. A large man came out into the hospital hall who did not frighten the beggar in the least, and with him at his side the head physician, the object of the scandal, was on his way. "What's going on here?" asked Victor, the head physician. "Yes, a violent tramp doesn't want to settle down and go away," replied the nurse arrogantly. "Very well, madam. We will get you out of the hospital in peace, or I shall have to call the police." "They won't be hard on you," said Victor gravely. He was irritated because he hated any scandals in his hospital, as usually such incidents were made public later, and he, for that, would not receive a pat on the head. Of course, none of this would have happened if your employee had not started being rude to an old lady. The poor woman was about to cry in front of her. The beggar woman explained calmly, "We will take care of it ourselves. You should go." Victor took out his mobile phone to calm himself down, to call the police. "I see, so that's it. This is how they communicate with ordinary people." The beggar woman sighed heavily and suddenly pulled back her hood. "That's it. The show's over." Her voice became even louder and more commanding. "I'm the new mayor of the city." She showed her ID with her name on it. "Kira." "What?" "It's a joke." Victor's face changed immediately. "I'm sorry, Kira, we didn't know. They didn't know." "I see." He looked sternly at the head physician, who went from a self-assured man to a nobody in just a minute. "Apparently, you can communicate normally with high-ranking people, but you don't care about the rest. You don't care about your patients at all." "Why are you dressed like that?" I asked him, to change the subject. And so on. I have to check how their services work in our city. When I'm in an expensive, unrecognizable suit, our city becomes perfect in every way. But when you have to dress up as a beggar, all the problems come out at once. At the meeting, they told me one thing, that everything was going well, that the whole city was literally covered in reagents. People didn't complain, but actually it turned out to be different, and today I was doubly lucky. It turns out that the hospital doesn't respect people at all, especially the elderly. It can't be. It's not like that at all. This hospital is the best in town, you know that. Well, yes, the facilities are good. That's what it's good at. But apart from that, he shook his head. You and that nurse are going to be fired, I assure you. Hospitals will always be a mess with people like that, and we try to fight against it. So let's start with you, Kira said, no emotion on her face. Kira, don't get so heated up so quickly. I hear you. We're going to get better. You will. Not after what I've seen here. I have no confidence in you, or your staff. The chief medical officer has to set an example for his employees. And what are you showing? Victor, do something. I have a baby, the young nurse pleaded, then burst into tears to make people feel sorry for her. Shut up, I don't care, the man growled, turning to the mayor. You can't just dismiss me, he turned to Kira. I'll deal with the public service workers first. And then you, Kira left the room. Victor was covered in damp sweat. He still couldn't believe what had just happened. "Shit!" he cursed and looked at the angry nurse. "It's all your fault. You don't know how to talk to people properly." "I'm sorry. I didn't want to," she cried, wiping away her tears. Victor just waved his hand and left for his office, which for the moment still belongs to him. Kira was already there. She decided to point out to the head physician all the shortcomings of his department. Victor immediately became friendly. He was willing to do a lot to keep his villa. At that very moment, after her doctor's appointment, Luzmila was walking slowly down the hall. The cardiologist had again prescribed a whole list of expensive medicines, and Luda didn't know where to get the money to pay for them all. The prices had gone up again, but her pension hadn't. She sighed heavily and went down to the lobby. There she was, greeted by a security guard who helped her put on her old winter coat. Luzmila was shocked. Just a few minutes ago, the nurse was ready to destroy her with just a look. She cursed all over the hallway, making her cry. And now they want to help me put on my coat. "Did something happen? Are you okay?" the man asked. "Yes, at my age, everything is fine," Luda replied modestly. "Come on, you look good." "I'm sure you do. Not everything is bad for you." "Honey, at my age, you'll understand." She smiled kindly at the guard, wondering, why was he so polite to her? Did something happen here? Number, what makes him think that? A few minutes ago, they were yelling at me and insulting me, and now they're even helping me put on my coat. The guard didn't say anything. He just suggested that the old lady take a taxi home. After hearing the answer that she didn't have any money, the man said that it was no problem and paid for the trip himself. "Thank you very much," he bowed. "There are still good and selfless people in the world. God bless you, son. You haven't left this old lady stranded." She breathed a sigh of relief because she wouldn't have to walk home on ice. Finally, Luzmila glanced around the room. The beggar woman had disappeared. Had they thrown her out or not? It was too loud here. What if ordinary people are treated so badly here with people like her? Of course not. Poor thing. I wish I could find her and help her. I would have given her my old jacket and hat. At least then she wouldn't be cold. Bought bread. Who else is going to help her? Luzmila thought sadly. Sitting in the warm interior of the car when she returned home, she was greeted as usual by a cheerful Tuzik who had missed his mistress. He began barking, licking her hands and wagging his tail. "You're a good boy," she said, and patted him on the head. "You've missed me." When I smiled and said they could walk around the house for a while, it was as if Tuzik understood her, because he started barking even louder with unbridled joy. As he ran close to Luzmila, she put her hands in her pockets and felt around for a hard paper thing. As she pulled it out of her pocket, the woman screamed and looked around. Luckily, no one was there. Luda looked away at the thick wad of bills, and her hands shook, either from surprise or fear. Maybe from all of the above. She had never had one of those in her entire life. My God, where did it come from? I might be carrying it. I'm in someone else's coat. Luzmila looked around just in case. She was wearing her old coat, which was already patched in some places and had a pin inside. Luzmila immediately called Tuzik, and they left. She was afraid of being on the street with such a large amount of money. As she went up to her flat, the thought crossed her mind that it could have been done by a vagrant. But how? Where could she have gotten so much money? She could have robbed someone. Luzmila shook her head because she was also in a difficult situation, but she never took a penny from another person. I remember one time when she left the bank after collecting her pension. As usual, she went to the store and bought a bag of milk and bread, but as soon as she left there, she was attacked, like kites. The drunk men, who seemed to be chasing her from the bank, pounced on her. It was daytime, and Luzmila did not take Tuzik with her, thinking that nothing would happen. But she was very wrong. Those scoundrels took her entire pension, leaving the woman with nothing. She had no savings, and how could she have them if all she had was to pay for utilities, medicines, food and bread for herself and the dog? Luzmila cried all night, and Tuzik lay down with her beside him as if trying to comfort his unhappy mistress. "What am I going to do, my friend? How are we going to be without money? I can't even get a part-time job." That night she was so sick that she sat at the table talking to pictures of her husband and son. "There is no one to protect me. My protectors have long since left. I feel so bad, so bad. I can't wait to be with you, my dear ones, so I don't have to suffer here, alone. I'm sad, and my heart hurts. I'm only happy with Tulsik, and there's no one else." She wiped her tears with a handkerchief and held the photos to her chest, where her heart beat. Luzmila remembered this for some reason. If the homeless woman really did it, she has a big heart. She needed the money herself. But she ended up giving it to a stranger or an old lady to help her. Luda dismissed the idea that the beggar woman could have robbed someone. Well, she didn't look like such a person. Kind-hearted people would never prefer to give the last of their money to the needy. That's what she did. Thinking about it, the woman couldn't hold back her tears. She had been saved by a homeless woman. They were tears of joy, but also of gratitude, because she needed the money urgently. For one thing, she had to pay the rest of her utility bill. Secondly, she needed to buy her medicines again. And thirdly, she was about to celebrate her 75th birthday, but she had no one to celebrate it with. Before going to bed, Luzmila couldn't sleep for a long time, thinking about the day she had spent, and it was not so much because of the money as because of the beggar's kindness. And as she calmed down, the woman realized that she had heard the woman's voice somewhere before, but she didn't know where it came from. Maybe I've met her before, somewhere. I don't have a good memory, but there's something familiar about her, and Luzmila remembered when the homeless woman had unexpectedly knocked on the door. Except she wasn't dressed in rags anymore. This woman did not look like a tramp at all, as she was wearing an expensive coat, a nice beret, and an elegant handbag, and she was such a beautiful and statuesque woman that Luzmila even felt confused. Such a woman did not fit in the interior of Luda's old and shabby apartment, but that was not the most important thing. When Luda looked at her more closely, she covered her mouth with her palm in shock, and her eyes filled with tears. She could not believe it. Before, this majestic woman had been a frail little girl who was often bullied by the children at the orphanage. She couldn't fight back, so she would run to Luzmila, who would comfort and cheer her up. Sometimes she would even pamper her with candy. "Kira, is that you?" Luzmila asked. "Yes, it's me." She smiled widely. "I immediately recognized what happened yesterday. Luzmila Fedorovna. Come in, dear, come in. Don't stand there at the door, that's not right. I have tea. God, how nice. I can't believe it." "Kira, my child, you're here," Luda said with a smile as she entered the kitchen. Kira smiled. She loved and respected Luzmila immensely, for it was she who had helped her become what she was now. And if it hadn't been for their kindness and compassion, it's unlikely that Kira would have been able to make her way in the world. The woman had a difficult childhood. Kira was born into a dysfunctional family where her parents drank a lot. She didn't see toys or nice clothes or even basic love and care from her parents. Kira had to watch her parents turn from intelligent people into alcoholics, for whom the bottle was more important than anything else. She had a grandmother who took Kira in, but it was difficult to support herself, her disabled husband and her granddaughter on her tiny pension. So Tatiana couldn't take the child in, even if Kira asked her to. My grandmother tried to talk some sense into Kira's parents. What kind of parents are they? Look at their daughter walking like a wreck. Where have they come to? And they were in great demand as teachers, Tatiana complained, going to her granddaughter in her arms. "Don't teach me how to live," Yuri said rudely and slammed his hand on the table. He was dirty and unshaven, with wrinkled clothes that he hadn't washed for months. A mother is supposed to be understanding, and all she does is scold and scold. She eats, she doesn't live on the streets, and she doesn't walk around naked. What more do you want? I don't recognize you, son. I'll tell you that I would ruin you. Tatiana, she nodded at Marina, who was already so drunk and fast asleep, face down on the table. You've been warned, don't spend all weekend drinking. And this is what came out. Get out of here and take this one with you so she doesn't get in the way. I'm sick of both of you, Yuri said, referring to mother and daughter. Well, let's go. Tatiana took Kira by the hand and left the apartment, which always smelled of alcohol. Well, are Mum and Dad going to be okay? She asked naively. Kira thought Mum and Dad were just sick. I'm not so sure, poor thing. Why did God punish you like that? It's okay. I won't leave you. Yes, we will live badly, but not worse than you live now. I will take you away. But Tatiana never had the chance to take Kira. First, her husband died, and she could not bear his death. Tatiana had a fit and died in her bed. Little Kira went to her grandmother's room in the morning to wake her up. They were going to the market to buy meat for dinner. Wake up, I was getting dressed. I was already dressed. Grandma, get up. But Tatiana did not move. Kira continued to gasp for a long time and then ran to her neighbor crying. Help! My grandmother won't wake up, she screamed. And the neighbor immediately ran to her apartment. Kira, grandmother won't wake up anymore, the woman said, when she realized that Tatiana had died. Why? We tried again. She left after her husband. How come she left? I mean, grandmother is going to be buried too. She won't come back. When the girl woke up, she saw her crying. Her neighbor took her home, gave her food and drink, and took care of Tatiana's funeral. Kira, on the other hand, had to go back to her parents, who paid no attention to her and continued drinking with their friends. One of them even raised his hand to Kira once she entered the kitchen and asked her to turn down the music. Her father waved her away. Her mother was standing on the balcony smoking, but her friend was very angry. What a rude daughter you have. Why does she wander around here and bother us? Can't she see that the adults are busy? Go to your room, Yuri told her sternly. But Dad, the music is disturbing my sleep. He got angry, grabbed Kira by the arm roughly, and led her out of the kitchen. Sit down and shut your mouth. You have no respect for parents or adults. Kira put her hand to her cheek and cried quietly so that no one would hear her. She was afraid that they would pick on her again because she was loud and bothered the adults. But the real test awaited her when her parents simply put her in an orphanage. Mom, Dad, where are you going? She asked, grabbing a small bundle of clothes. I'm going home. And me? You're staying here. For how long? We don't know. You're coming back. You'll take me, right? She looked at them with pity, barely able to keep from crying. Don't ask us any more questions. Goodbye. Mom, Dad, don't leave me here. Kira ran after her parents, but the tears in her eyes kept her from seeing the way. The girl stumbled, fell into a puddle, and then the gate closed behind Yuri and Marin. Kira sobbed loudly when she realized her parents were gone forever. And she sat down right in a puddle. What are you doing sitting here? Let's go inside the building. You're going to get sick. Luzmila approached her, and it was Luda's first meeting. I'll wait for Mom and Dad, she said stubbornly. They brought me here so I wouldn't be in the way. But then they'll take me home for sure. They will. But you can wait for them in the heat. Luda smiled thoughtfully and took the little girl's hand. There will be a delicious lunch soon. You must be hungry, right? Very hungry, she said with big eyes, looking at the kind woman. Now you'll get warm and eat, and you won't be so sad anymore. Let's wipe away the tears. You mustn't cry anymore. Luda and Kira entered the orphanage. She immediately saw that the girl was very smart and capable, but no one worked with her. But as soon as she was given some books, Kira quickly learned to read and then to write. Despite all the insults, the hard life in the orphanage, the humiliations and the struggle for a piece of bread, Kira did not stop studying, deciding for herself that in the future she would have a rich and happy life. And Luzmila helped her a lot because Kira had problems with maths and physics. But thanks to her tutor, she was able to overcome all the problems and pass the exams well, and then go to a prestigious university in a state-funded department. If it hadn't been for her support during all the years in the orphanage, if it hadn't been for her openness and kindness, who knows what would have become of Kira? Perhaps she would have had a low-paying job like many of the residents of orphanages. Or maybe she would have given up, gotten a state apartment, and drank herself to death there. Unfortunately, life after the orphanage was not always so rosy, and many people did not survive due to their psychological traumas. And now, Kira is the mayor of the town. She has built a dizzying career that has given her the good and prosperous life she had always dreamed of. But Kira did not spend all the money only on herself. She often helped orphanages, understanding what life was like there. Here she helped Luzmila when she saw her by chance and recognized her. She was in shock. She told her how bad her former teacher looked, and her heart was about to burst out of her chest with pity. She couldn't let it go, but she couldn't stop her inspection either. So Kira approached the woman like a beggar, and while Luzmila attended to the reception nurse, Kira put a wad of bills in her coat pocket. But Kira couldn't stop. So the next day she went to see Luzmila to see how she was doing, even though she knew things weren't going too well for her. "Luzmila, I'm sorry you're alone," Kira said, covering her wrinkled hand with her own. When she heard the story of the former educator, she could hardly hold back her tears. How cruelly fate has treated this brilliant, kind woman. And you know what? Something bad may have happened to him. "There is, my daughter, there is. He's gone, my son. I didn't want to let him go north to work. I felt in my heart that something would happen to him. But he didn't listen to me. He left and never came back. It's been several years now. I've already lost hope since I came back. How? He hasn't come back. God, what's going on?" "I'll help you find him," Kira said immediately. "I'm sure you will. I know he's alive. He's just gotten himself into some trouble. Come on. Girl, there are more important things to do. After all, you're in charge of the whole town. You don't need to look for my Sasha. Luzmila, if it weren't for you, I would never have become mayor. Besides, Sasha grew up in the same orphanage as me. He always treated me well, helped me, and even gave me his own piece of bread. A good boy. I remember him well. I don't think he's dead. Kira, he's not coming back. Where will you look for him? Impossible. Luzmila, don't despair. Don't lose hope completely." "Yes, I said I would find Sasha. I will." Kira made a request through her channels to the north. The search for Sasha took several weeks. Luzmila was waiting for a reply from Kira, but she didn't have much hope of hearing good news. It turned out that the man had accepted a job at a semi-legal mine. The money promised to be big, so she couldn't resist the offer. During his last shift at work, Sasha suffered a serious head injury and damage to his spine. He didn't have his papers on him when he was discovered by a police officer at a bus stop in a small town, because the mine owners had taken them away so there wouldn't be too much fuss. He was lying on a snow-covered bench, unable to scream or get up because of the spinal injury. He could barely move his leg. His body was washed. He thought he was going to freeze to death. They took him to the hospital, and the doctors said the injuries were very serious. Alexander was diagnosed with amnesia and a dislocated spine. The robust adult man instantly felt helpless and lost. He didn't know what. He didn't remember where he was from or where the way home was. He had marks of serious injuries. "I can't leave you," the doctor said. He said something about himself. No, I don't remember anything except his name. He called himself Sasha. He doesn't have any papers on him either. The police found him at a bus stop. I see. He hit his head very hard. His memory is gone. We can't keep him in the hospital forever. We'll send him to a hospice. When Alexander got a little stronger, he started working part-time as a stewardess. Despite the pain, he took on any job that a wheelchair user could do. Many felt sorry for the man who had lost his memory and couldn't return to his family. He didn't even know if he had a family. But Sasha wanted to believe that he did. He hoped that sooner or later he would be found and returned to his home, where his loved ones would be waiting for him. Maybe I'm married. Maybe I have children or parents. How would I like to find out? Alexander thought, lying in his small room on the uncomfortable bed. He thought about his family almost every night. He imagined them and even missed them. Still, the feeling that someone was waiting for him and never left him. Then one day, a beautiful woman came to see him. She informed him that tomorrow they would fly together. Home. Home? I have a home. He was confused, looking at Kira. Not just home, but at your mother. Who is waiting for you? What happened to you? Because of the head wound. I lost my memory. I didn't have the documents with me. I don't remember anything about myself. We will take you back and heal you. You will return to a normal life, Sasha. Kira smiled at him and took his hands. He smiled back and felt intensely happy that this woman had found him and was willing to take him home. Along the way, Kira slowly told Sasha about her life. She also mentioned the orphanage where they grew up together. So we've known each other for a long time? Yes, but we haven't seen each other for years, Kira said regretfully, because at 40 years old, she had never been able to love anyone more than Sasha. At the orphanage, they were friends and often spent time together. Kira used to teach Sasha to cheer up. Sasha was a good friend and stood up for him when he was teased about his sore leg. But Sasha didn't just sit back when he saw Kira being teased. When they grew up, they fell in love. Sasha picked flowers and gave them to him, and Kira wrote him nice notes. Sasha was very happy to receive him. When Luzmila decided to adopt Sasha, he was happy and not happy at the same time. All the children at the orphanage dreamed of finding a family, but the boy didn't want to be separated from Kira. I love you, Akira told her and said goodbye, and he shyly kissed her. It was their first kiss. And I love you, Sasha. I'll miss you. We'll definitely see each other again. I know, the boy said, almost crying. Sasha, Akira clung to him with tears in her eyes. I will wait for this more than anything in the world. And they found each other. It took decades for them to do so, and although Sasha did not remember anything about his former love for Kira, she did remember him. For years, they tried to build a solid and serious relationship. She was in a relationship, but she had no heart for other men. She was constantly thinking about his home at the orphanage and dreaming of seeing him, but she knew nothing about him. Kira had been afraid that he had a wife and children for a long time, so she had no desire to look for him, but now, sitting next to him and holding his hand, she felt her love for this man overwhelm her. She wanted to tell him how she felt, but she didn't want to talk about it now. Sasha still had to meet her mother and start treatment. He was already very agitated. Kira admitted Sasha to a private clinic and the next day brought Alguda. The woman's heart sank. She sat down on the chair next to the bed and burst into tears. My son, you are alive, darling, and I had already given up hope of seeing your face, Sasha. Luzmila hugged him, still crying. The man closed his eyes and, feeling his mother's love, began to remember her and her life a little. Mom was very happy to hear that word. I'm back now. You're back, good man. Kira told me everything. It's okay. Your memory will come back and you'll heal. The main thing is that you're alive. She caressed his face, able to look at her son. Kira, thank you for giving me my son back. If it weren't for you, Luzmila, don't worry. "You can't," she hugged her. "It's okay. Everything will get better." "Yes, it will get better," the woman repeated. Doctors performed several complicated operations on Sasha and told her that her memory would return, little by little. "Will she be able to walk?" Kira asked. "She will, but not like before. Be prepared for that." And Sasha did start walking, but very slowly and with a cane. Kira and Luzmila were also happy about it. Sasha was coming too, and that was already a great blessing for the women who loved him so much. Luzmila also underwent treatment, and thanks to Kira's care, her health began to improve. The old woman was treated by the best cardiologists. The weakness began to disappear, and the pain in her heart subsided. It was as if she had been born again. Soon, Kira revealed her secret to Sasha. She told him that she had loved him all this time. How, after all these years? "Kira, why do you love me? A disabled, unhappy man. You are so successful and beautiful. You will find a healthy man. I don't need anyone but you, Sasha." She replied and kissed him. "I have been looking for happiness for so many years, and you are my happiness. I love you." She smiled happily. Sasha was even a little embarrassed to confess his feelings to her because he felt helpless, a nobody by her side, unable to make the woman happy. But over time, Kira's love and warmth and affection showed him that he could be loved like that too. Although they were no longer young, it is an obstacle to feelings that had been through years and many trials. Luzmila blessed them with her marriage. Kira and Sasha got married. They bought the house they dreamed of. Luzmila and Tuzik, of course, have also lived with them as a big, happy family that has had to endure so many trials.